Welcome, investigator. Evil is on the rise. Crime is escalating. Our mission is to eliminate the crime by exposing evil, examine why it manifests, and highlight the brave souls that confront it every day. Join us as we work together to bring justice to every victim. Welcome to All Things Crime. Here's your host, Jared Bradley.
Hey everybody, it's Jared. Welcome back to another episode of All Things Crime, coming to you from Utah, and have a special guest today, Alfred Anderson. He's a former deputy. He's also owned a number of businesses, and he's also an author. And so met him through a couple of different acquaintances, and yeah, I think it's going to be a really interesting discussion today. So I wanted to welcome you in. Also wanted to encourage you, if you haven't subscribed yet, to please subscribe to the channel, both YouTube, Rumble, and also wherever you listen to your podcasts. So, Alfred, welcome. And I understand you are in Costa Rica right now. What is that all about?
Well, thank you for having me, Jared. Costa Rica is all about paradise. It's getting out of winter. That's the main thing for me.
Yeah.
My wife is Costa Rican. She's also
Okay.
A dual citizen. So we spend half the year here and the rest up in Northeast Washington.
Yeah, well, like we were discussing earlier, we got hammered with like 6 inches of snow last night here in the northwest. So I'm sure your other home is buried in snow right now. So you are definitely in the right place.
I empathize with you.
No, you don't. You're
No.
down there in Costa Rica just enjoying the sunshine. It's just not even fair.
Well, it's been 20 years we've been doing it, and I retired about 8 years ago, and I just was bound and determined to not shovel snow anymore. If you know what I mean. I was born and raised in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Some of the toughest winters, anywhere in the lower 48. So I know it well, especially cold weather. And
yeah,
when I hit 40, I said I had enough, got out of there. So,
well, I can definitely tell the Minnesota accent. So,
oh, okay.
Minnesota. I love it.
Hey,
Yeah.
out and about.
Yeah, you and Canada, man, you guys got a lot more in common than the Southern folks, definitely.
I lived in England for 4 years, and they all thought I was Canadian.
Oh, for sure.
It was an advantage.
All right. Well, hey, let's get into why we wanted to have you on the show here. First of all, you have to give us a little context as to what your career path was, because most people, especially that want to go into law enforcement, they've wanted to go into law enforcement for ever since they were little kids, but it doesn't seem like that was the way that you entered into law enforcement. So explain to us kind of what you did.
Okay. When I was going to school over in England, I was in a security guard. So I kind of had a prequel to, the desire to get into something like that. But it never occurred to me until I hit the age of 40 and I had semi-retired from businesses I owned. Various events in Key Largo, Florida, where I lived for a while, kind of cemented that desire. And they were somewhat violent criminal activities that occurred at the location I worked, which was an Arby's, believe it or not. Anyway, so after that, I decided I took the LSAT, which is the law scholastic aptitude test. Did all right, but it was too late in the year to really go to the University of Wyoming where I was living at the time. So I decided, maybe I'd be more apt to be a law enforcement officer. So which I did. I went to school at the College of Southern Idaho for a year, became certified, got a degree, and was later employed with the Valley County Sheriff. I was a deputy, and probably it was the best career of my life because it was so eye-opening. And I wrote the book because so many people would tell me after relating anecdotal stories, you need to write a book. So I said, and I've never been a great writer of anything. So I sat down and wrote the first 3 chapters of this book called Deputy Know Your Rights. And I died. It just died. So down here a year ago, about this time last year, I have a friend down here who published a book himself. And he said, you need to finish that book. So I did. I finished it. And the whole purpose of it was to educate the public on their lack of knowledge of their rights. It's shocking how ignorant and how abysmally educated people are as far as their constitutional rights. And I speak more from the aspect of the Fourth, the Fifth, and the Second Amendments, because we as law enforcement officers, those first 2, the Fourth and Fifth, is what we're interacting with the public on that basis. In other words, the Fourth is the right to remain secure in your persons, houses, paper, and effects shall not be violated except upon probable cause. Okay, so what does that mean? And this is very important because I can't stop a car or any person on the street without probable cause. And what does that mean? It means I have to have evidence that a crime has been committed or about to be committed. Now, in the case of a traffic stop, it means a violation of traffic code. Okay, a light out, speed, anything. And that gives me the right to stop that vehicle. But the problem is when I approach that vehicle, people need to just not say anything. They need to shut up. Now, does that mean be unkind, discourteous, disrespectful? No. If I say, are you having a good day? Be friendly and answer. But if I start asking you, how fast were you going? Or have you had anything to drink? Or do you have anything in your car that I should be aware of? You just simply say, officer, I prefer not to answer any of those questions, which is your right. One's right under the Fifth Amendment is called pleading the Fifth, as we all know it, but it's the right to remain silent. And as per the Miranda Act, it was encoded that once we made a detention, an arrest, we had to recite the Miranda Act to advise that person of their rights. But as soon as you answer a question, and I'm recording and video recording, everything, it's all in evidence. If you admit to going just 1 mile over the speed limit, you've incriminated yourself. And don't do it. Don't say I had just 1 beer. No, that opens the can of worms. Just say, officer, I prefer not to answer those questions.
So let me play devil's advocate with you here.
Okay.
I would say, based on my experience, I've never personally been arrested, but when I have been pulled over and, first of all, I think it's human nature for people to answer questions. So it totally makes sense that most people would immediately incriminate themselves, especially if they haven't ever read your book. So, but if that were to happen, like say an officer is just pulling somebody over and there's nothing else that, like what you were saying, they don't suspect another crime has happened that this person that they pulled over they might be involved in. So it's just simply a traffic stop. They have a rear tail light that's out. Okay. You say when the officer goes up and says, "Hey, do you know why I pulled you over?" And according to what you just said, you should say, "Officer, I'm not going to answer your question." Well, from there, to me, based on everything that I've seen in the past, the officer would escalate it to, "Well, if you don't answer my questions, I'm going to take you in," basically, or something like that. So if it's just a traffic stop and the officer doesn't have anything that we'll divide these into 2 scenarios. So if it's just a simple traffic stop, and the person won't answer or doesn't want to answer any questions and says, "Officer, I don't feel I need to answer those questions," then what happens?
Basically, in all traffic stops, according to all state laws encoded, a person does not have a right to drive. It's a privilege granted by the state. But also, according to most laws, all you have to produce are 3 documents: your driver's license, proof of insurance, and registration. That's all. You don't have to answer any questions. And if an officer threatens to arrest you for not answering his questions, that's a violation of your civil rights. And you have a possibility of a lawsuit against that officer. Now, again, I
Just the threat,
emphasize
so you're saying just the threat of escalating it is a violation of your rights.
it can be construed as that because he's threatening or almost being an assault on you as far as trying to negate your right to remain silent. And that's common. One can see through the YouTube videos that I've looked at numerous times of officers confronting a guy that's recording it or a woman, and they just simply say, "We're not going to answer your questions." And they might make threats, but then if they did arrest without probable cause that a crime was committed or about to be committed, they've made an illegal arrest. There's a lawsuit coming. And there are
Wow.
people that have won thousands of dollars against first the officer, then it goes to the agency, and then the governmental agency that controls that law enforcement agency. It goes right up the ladder. So, as it was, for instance, a famous case, we all know about the Rodney King case in Los Angeles years ago, where these 4 cops beat the hell out of Rodney King, and they were found not guilty of any crime in the state courts. However, the federal government took those officers to court on violation of civil rights charges. 2 of them were found guilty and spent time in jail.
Hmm. So when you went through the academy and discussed this as you were training to be a deputy, as well as the schooling that you did, how much do they focus on your, the exact same thing that we're talking about, the Fourth and Fifth Amendments specifically? How much do they beat that into the heads of the deputies to say, look, if somebody says this is it's you've got to be going through those scenarios as far as the training multiple times, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I highlight that in the book as far as learning law, the chapter called Learning Law, where we learned, and I've had people ask me, well, did you know these rights before you started? And I admit, I was as ignorant as the next person. I didn't know them, but it was the powerful training of constitutional law first, of course, ethics, number of different subjects we covered as far as how to treat the public and how to stay out of trouble for lawsuits. It was very important. Now, we went through other training, firearms training, tactical training, and so on and so forth. But probably it was the most important phase of our learning, understanding the law.
Yeah.
And we don't have the time as deputies or officers out there like an attorney does. He can sit at his desk and peruse the law, and the laws are all broken up into elements. And if you have to satisfy each element of that law before arrest can be made, well, we're out there and we got to make decisions in minutes. We have to know that law well. Unfortunately, we're seeing too much abuse on the part of the police today. And I shudder to think of the results. And more people are getting sued because of bad policing.
Again, to play devil's advocate, from what I've seen and how the police are treated and disrespected, and just the tension that is almost immediately there, especially, I mean, it's worse in some parts of the country than others, and obviously some of the cities around the country, I don't know how anybody stays in law enforcement, because those guys, not only is there massive amounts of tension with the public, but they don't have any support from their chain of command. And to me, that's just a nightmare. It's just they talk about, work conditions and a toxic work environment. Man, I can't think of anything worse. But anyway, that aside, based on today's current atmosphere, when, officers, they're getting shot all the time, getting shot at all the time. I think I saw the stat for the year 2023, there were almost 300 officers around the country that were murdered or killed. And many of those during traffic stops and just simple, you would think would be fairly simple police activities. Even, issuing a warrant turns out to be some of the most dangerous things that these guys can do. And so,
Actually, domestics.
Yeah. Okay.
Domestic violence is one of the worst. Because surprisingly, even though, let's say a woman was beat to hell by her husband, when we go in to arrest him, she'll retaliate. She doesn't want him to go. It's almost the Stockholm Syndrome situation. That's why we never went in without two officers separating both.
Yeah.
But it's extremely dangerous. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. I wouldn't want to be a police officer in a big city. It's a war zone. No thanks.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, these guys, I mean, my hat's off to them, and just 2 days ago was National Law Enforcement Appreciation Day. And, there's a lot of people that posted, thanks for doing these things, but, how many of us actually go above and beyond that and really support, the law enforcement the way we should. And it's just, sometimes I'm like, you know what? It's, you make decisions and you set environments and you create, how do you even say this? You create an atmosphere where it may not affect you immediately, but eventually it's going to negatively affect you and everybody around you. And I think that's kind of where we're at. And it's been, this stage has been being set for quite a while now.
Disaster.
And yeah. And I tell you, if you play this out another decade, it's not going to end well. And we've got to end it. Now, back to your book and why we're actually having this discussion. I 100% agree that people need to know their rights, and by knowing their rights and the deputies or the police officer also knowing his rights and what he's responsible for, of course, that you would think that would lessen the tension and kind of de-escalate the situation of where we're at. But the problem is we have all these kind of instigators on the other side that are just throwing gasoline on the flames all the time.
Well, let me give you an example of what you're referring to. And I refer to that. I write about all of these subjects in the book. But when I made an arrest, it was all about respect. It was all about, this citizen has committed an error. It's not my job to judge them, criticize them, or condescend with them. I always approached an arrest in this manner. I'd say, hey, look, we've got a problem here. Let's go to Cascade and get it fixed. And invariably, 99% of the time, they would go from hands ready to beat me, and they'd turn around, put their hands behind their back. Now, can you see the psychology I used?
Of course.
You and me,
yeah.
I didn't isolate them. I included myself as almost an advocate. And I did it with kindness. I didn't do it with condescension and, what younger officers, the way they approach it. That's unfortunate. I started when I was 41 officially as a law enforcement officer. And as I relate in the book, there was a certain amount of humility that I carried with it. And I live by the adage that humility is the catalyst that makes power benevolent. With humility, we realize that power is not in us, it's vested in us. And to think it's of us, these young guys go around thinking that badge weighs 30 pounds and their chest sticks out. With me, But by the grace of God go I. I had had some of the shit kicked out of me through the years, and I was humbled, and I understood. Whether it be drunken driving, believe me, I have driven drunk, and I'm thankful I didn't get stopped. I admit it in the book, but I was very much an expert at DUI arrests because I knew they were an extreme danger to the public, and it was my job to safeguard the public from them. So it gets down to respect, kindness. Now, there gets to be a time when we have to use incrementation of force when it comes to dealing with some people. Sometimes they don't get it, so you raise your voice. And if they don't get it then, and they come at you, then you may have to use less than lethal weapons, whether it be OC spray, a taser. But too often now I'm seeing in the public officers going right to their pistol. It's just madness. And it's not lethal, not a lethal situation. It's just they don't have the training, and it just creates huge vulnerabilities to the counties, cities, or governments that control them. And I point
Yeah.
that all out in the book. And it's a combination of good stories that also bring into play how one should react with their rights in any situation.
Yeah, it's interesting. Being actively interacting with not only law enforcement but also the procurement and the financial sides of it. Which I do with my business. I find that there are far too many, especially the larger agencies, and especially the ones that really don't get a lot of support. Kind of
Mhm.
what is happening, and it's been happening for a while now, is number one, because of the work environment, they don't have enough officers, period. They're never really at full strength. My understanding is, like, the San Francisco PD,
Hmm.
they are at less than 60, they're like 65% strength. So that means that for every 10 officers that should be on call or on duty, there's basically only 6 to 7 that are readily available that should be there. So they got to draw, if they need 100% strength, they have to draw from other people that should be sleeping. But there's also there's underfunding there. The
Well,
officers
who wants to work for a department that in a liberal city where it's defund the police? I
Oh
wouldn't want
yeah.
to do it. I'd go to
Yeah.
a much middle size or a smaller county or whatever. Who needs
Yeah.
that headache?
Oh, like I said, I don't know how those guys keep doing it, but it's just a loyalty and a love of their city and the community that has to keep them going, because it's definitely not, the politicians are demonizing them all the time,
No. Yeah.
and yeah, it's just crazy. But to my point, that a lot of these officers, because they're stretched so thin just to have, the boots on the ground and, the people out there patrolling, that they don't have time and they don't have the resources to send these guys to training and to get them,
Well, I
all
should
of this
say
stuff.
continuing training. They
Yeah.
all have to go through a certain amount in order to be certified. But you're correct. There's always a continuation of training, and that's what's lacking.
Yeah. Well, but like you said, in the academy, you learned lots of things. You learned how to fire your weapon. You learned how to, do all sorts of, even SWAT activities. I'm sure I have a military background. And
Mhm.
so, when I went through basic training, which I'm sure is basically equivalent to the academy, you don't get really, really in depth of very many subjects, because that whatever you're learning, when you get to your duty station, they are going to continue that training. Well, in
Right.
today's environment, a lot of these agencies, they don't have the people, the manpower, because they're at, like you said, 60 to 70% strength. And your ability to take some of your workforce and send them to a training for a week or 2 weeks, you just don't have it. You don't have the manpower to do that.
Right.
And when
Right.
the county or the city doesn't help with funding, doesn't help with hiring new officers and making the environment friendly enough, a workforce or a workplace environment that is friendly. I mean, if I get so upset when I hear about some of these things because if the same thing happened, what is happening in some of our police agencies, if that same, toxic work environment existed anywhere else, that company would get sued, people would get fired. But when we're talking about, the police agency, it's almost like it's everybody just gets a pass. The mayor and the city council that are creating such a horrible workplace environment for these officers.
Well, there's
There's
no
no
accountability on the
yeah.
politician's part. That's the
Oh, there's
problem.
none. Yeah,
You see that
absolutely.
in Congress, the U.S. Congress, they allow that southern border to be wide open. You got criminal activity in the Biden administration and other senators and such, and nobody ever goes to jail. Nobody is accountable. And so they feel that they don't care. We'll do what we want. They pass
Yeah.
laws continually to limit the right to bear arms, even though the Supreme Court and the appellate courts are knocking them down constantly. They just keep flooding their states with these laws that are just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And so there's a lack of respect, not only for these police officers, some of it warranted, some of it not, but also for government in general.
Yeah, it's a noble profession, and it's been demonized so much that I I I don't know. It's really hard to explain because I don't think the people that are demonizing, especially the law enforcement profession, understand the repercussions of what they're doing.
Well, we're
And
targets. As soon as we put on that uniform, the day we
yeah,
become an officer, we're a target in uniform and out. And that's why most of us always carry a weapon.
yeah,
Because, like with local people, they know where we live. And they will, if there's a bad guy out there, they'll come after us. And we are aware of it constantly. We are targets. And it's unfortunate, but that was the times
yeah.
in which
Oh
it's
yeah.
always been like that, but not to the degree it is today.
No, in 2020 when all those riots were going on, I have a couple of there's law enforcement guys, even Salt Lake PD live in my neighborhood, and during the riots right after the George Floyd incident, their their home address was doxxed,
Yes.
and I was basically like, you know what, brother, when you go to work, trust me, in this neighborhood, your family's safe.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
Lord
necessary.
help
And,
anybody that
you know,
that comes into our neighborhood with bad intent because there's even the guys that aren't law enforcement. The Second Amendment is alive and well in Saratoga Springs. I'll tell you that.
it's a very necessary thing.
Yeah,
Like Benjamin Franklin, I quote in the book a lot of people, but Ben Franklin was asked by a woman as he came out of the Continental Congress, "What form of government have you given us, sir?" And he
yeah,
replied, "A republic, ma'am, if you can keep it."
right.
And it takes a educated, vigilant, and armed people to maintain the republic. And it's being
Yeah.
destroyed.
So before we came on, you were talking about that, talking about the Second Amendment and what the Second Amendment is actually all about. So why don't you go into that really quick?
Well, first of all, people are ignorant, and so is our congressional delegations, about what the Second Amendment is all about. It's amply written about in the Republican papers and such by the founding fathers that the Second Amendment is not about self defense. It's not about hunting. It's about maintaining the power in the hands of the people against a tyrannical government. That's it. And you will never see a congressman speak to that issue. If he did, the press would never report it. And if they did, they'd be fired.
Hmm.
It's that bad. The ignorance on the level of what the Second Amendment is all about, it's about defending against a tyrannical government in which we now have. It's absolutely out of control. And so every state, and I'm writing about it in my third book, every state or every sheriff should be forming a militia to protect that county. And a militia was designed and purposely allowed in that Second Amendment to maintain a militia. The right of the people to bear arms shall not be infringed. The militia was highly spoken of because it was what defended the country in the Revolutionary War. And a militia of the people will keep the government in check. When the government fears people, there is liberty. When the people fear government, there is tyranny.
Yeah. Well, you can look at other countries around the world, and every time they give up their ability to defend themselves,
There's wholesale slaughter.
Yeah, it's within 10 to 20 years. There's some kind of a major government takeover, and then the people become just basically. I mean, if they're allowed to continue to work in a free environment, but it's still kind of a form of slavery because they're really not free to do whatever they want to do. And yeah, I agree. It's a weird.
It's the one amendment that protects the whole document.
Mm-hmm.
Without that, the document would be gone. There would be no freedom of speech, as they are so amply annulling right now. There would be, all of the amendments would fail if it wasn't for that one amendment. It protects everything. And I emphasize that throughout the book with many quotes, many examples. It's a good read for a book. It would take a person 2 days to read it, but it's very educational and it's interesting from the standpoint that I use personal anecdotal stories to highlight the philosophies and the rights of the people that I try to expound.
Yeah, I agree. I've ordered my copy, and I can't wait till wait till it gets here. It's going to be one of my first airplane books. I travel a ton, and so when I do, again, traveling as much as I do, you run out of movies to watch, and so.
Well, you have to check out my second book, and the third one's on the way, but it's a novel.
Okay.
And I get involved with law enforcement issues, but it's called Sasha, My Guardian Sasquatch. Now, it's an unusual subject. It's an unusual subject, but Sasquatches are big in our part of the country. Mm-hmm. And it talks about a young sheriff that was just elected, encounters one up in the mountains, and he saves it because it's trapped. This creature comes back to save him. He's battling against the Mexican cartel that's bringing in the illegals and drugs from the north, which is happening. And it's a love story. It's a spicy love story, but not vulgar. Let's put it that way. And it's designed to
love story with the sheriff and the Sasquatch.
No. A beautiful gal a beautiful lady. Yeah.
Wow, that would be spicy. All right.
Yeah, but anyway, so and I'm writing the sequel right now, which incorporates different themes such as the invasion from the South and pedophilia, the child trafficking going on. So I write around these themes a good novel story, and so everybody is enjoying it. The comments I'm getting on the novel, especially. I mean, the first book is nonfiction, and it's more educational, but interesting. Mm-hmm. But the fun starts in book 2.
All right. Well, I will definitely look at that one as well. I'm excited about it. That's
it's listed under my Amazon account, and it's sold worldwide. It's being sold worldwide through. We've had purchases all over. Not a big seller yet. I mean, it just came out this last year with the second book, but like everything, it takes time.
Well, everything takes time. I mean, getting this podcast up and running, it takes time. Anything that's worthwhile takes a lot of effort, and it takes a lot of time. And you'll get there. If it's a good book, it'll eventually sell a ton. It's really interesting. The last, I don't know, 3 or 4 guests have all been authors.
Oh,
and law enforcement that have turned authors, and it's you guys have unique experiences that you bring a different flavor to books that I think a lot of people really enjoy. So it sounds like a pretty good combination.
well, it covers themes that most people don't even see, and it's truthful. And
Hmm.
that's where, in a lot of what we talk about, is people just don't understand what a law enforcement officer goes through.
Yeah.
The training, the incidences, the like the common saying, law enforcement is 90% boredom punctuated by 10% sheer terror. It's true.
Yeah.
When the very first chapter of the book of Deputy is it's called 911 Hang Up, and it talks about my going in the middle of the night to check out what happened. And I tried to do it in the present sense where the reader is following me and the feelings I'm having as far as what am I getting into? Is it a woman being held captive, or is it a suicide, or it's so it kind of hopefully grabs the reader right away to say, hey, I never knew those guys went through stuff like that. And that's the idea, to kind of bring to the public that perspective.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think something that would be similar maybe is, if you get a call from a really close family friend and the guy basically says, "Hey, I you're my buddy. I need you over here before I do something really drastic to my wife." And, if you're even though you're friends, you still have no idea if this guy is just, he's just the stress has just got to him and he just can't handle it anymore, and next thing you know, you're in the middle of it. But you know, I think the escalation from there, when you include the law enforcement, is you guys are obligated to actually do something if you see that there has been a crime committed, and a lot of times, especially if there's a 911 call, then many times there's going to be a crime committed, and
Right.
you can't just walk away. You have to do
Well,
something about it.
we see it all. I mean, as a deputy, the uniqueness about a deputy, the sheriff is the only elected official, law enforcement official in the country.
Hmm.
He is supreme in his own county. Nobody can come in his county and arrest him. FBI, state, city, no one. He has the power over, he's the most authoritative person in that county, and nobody can touch him. If he leaves the county, that's a different story. But in his county, he's sovereign. And that was substantiated in a case in Wyoming back in 97 by Dave Mathis, the sheriff of Bighorn County. He sued the BATF and IRS for violation of civil rights in his county without, going in, taking people's stuff without warrants. And he won. And anytime a sheriff doesn't want any agency in his county, he can kick them out or arrest them.
Mm.
People don't
Wow.
know that.
Yeah.
All other law enforcement chiefs are appointed. Only the
Mhm.
sheriff is elected.
Yeah. Well, to me, that kind of adds another layer of protection, really, because, you get a good, strong sheriff that knows his responsibilities and his rights and his obligations. And if he's running it basically according to the Constitution, and, I can name a number of sheriffs, and even the Sheriff Smith here in Utah County, where I live, I love the guy, but he's all about the rights of the citizens. And this is one of the best run counties, I think, in the entire country. And it's huge, but the crime is low. And you know what? I wouldn't ever worry about, shouldn't say ever, but as of right now, no, I don't have any fears of a deputy, that uh, violating my civil rights. I think they're run really well. And, but if they can, like you said, they have more authority than the federal government in that county, then that's another way, just like the Second Amendment is made for to keep a tyrannical government from rising.
Hmm.
I think a sheriff and a county would enable that county to be almost like sovereign against the state and the country as well.
Well, for instance, Washington State under Inslee is passing a lot of unconstitutional gun rights laws, and many sheriffs have says we're not going to enforce those.
Mm-hmm.
They're unconstitutional, and they can thwart even if a police department tries to do it. He can usurp their authority and say, no, you're not going to do that. He's king. He's king in his county, and he will decide what gets prosecuted or arrested or whatever. Nobody can touch him.
Well, that also tells you how important elections are.
Yes.
Yes,
they are.
I think we've all learned in the last 10 years how important even school boards are. Electing the right people to a school board, or electing the right sheriff, electing the right city councilman. That getting the men and women that actually believe in the country and believe in the freedoms and believe in the Constitution, getting those kind of people into the right positions, even at the local level, is so critical that you just can't ignore it and pretend that it's not something that's just absolutely critical.
If this country is going to be saved, it's going to be done on the local level. It can't be done on the national. The national is so corrupt. We saw in the last election how corrupt that was and how stolen it was. How do you stop that stuff? You can't, not on a local basis, but you can elect good people like sheriffs, and I emphasize them, number one, county commissioners, so on and so forth. At least in your one's area, you can try to maintain the wall of defense against this corruption.
Yeah. Well, the more power you have, the more easily corruptible. So you got to be really careful with that kind of stuff. So,
right.
Well, Alfred, tell us again what the names of your books are so people that are interested can go order them up from Amazon.
Right. Let me just kind of show them. The first one that I wrote is called Deputy, Know Your Rights. It's available Amazon ebook, hardcover, softcover, and now soon to be audiobook. The second one is called Sasha, My Guardian Sasquatch, which is a novel. It's a very good novel, but it brings in, as they say, the problems we're having with illegal immigration and drugs from the north. The sheriff battles against a Mexican cartel and is almost killed. So it's a powerful ending with a good love story, and it involves an entity that is so mysterious and secretive that you don't see much writing about them, but they are there. And I have personal secondhand evidence to the fact, at least in our county, up in Stevens County, in Ponderay County, that they've been seen multiple times. So it's a valid theme, but incorporates, the novel style of writing. So I think the people would really enjoy that. The third book that I'm about halfway through continues the sequel of Sasha, but it involves, as they say, the invasion from the south of young male age military people, but also the influx of unaccompanied minors and the child trafficking that goes on. So I try to incorporate current themes into a good story.
That child trafficking just drives me crazy.
I
think about 4 months ago, interviewed Paul Hutchinson, who is the executive producer of the movie, The Sound of Freedom.
Oh, yeah.
And some of his stories, man,
they're horrible.
it's just incredible. So yeah, child trafficking to me, I think that topic alone can make or break a society. And if we don't get that under control, we won't survive as a country.
Well, this whole Jeffrey Epstein crap, that guy was a Mossad agent that just entrapped everybody in power with anything from, illegal prostitution down to child abuse and child traffic or incidences, and it's just hideous to think about. A normal, loving parent has a hard time conceiving of what these people do.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah,
And that's what I try to cover in the subject of the third book.
Okay.
And it's powerful. It really, it's a powerful book from many standpoints. So,
well, I'll be very interested to see your perspective. So,
okay.
All right, Alfred. Well, hey, appreciate you coming on the show. And yeah, I will definitely be giving you some feedback on the book when I get a chance to read it.
Well, I always appreciate it, and I appreciate the time. It's been fun. I always enjoy a good podcast with people that understand law enforcement, and it's important. It's an important subject for people to know about.
Well, I have to say, I have one of the best audiences, I think, anywhere. So love them. Yeah, they're great people. They give me lots of feedback. And
please buy my book.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Alfred, and have a great day.
As well, and enjoy the new year.
Yes, sir. You too. Thanks for joining us. Your attention today brings us one step closer to exposing and eliminating the evil that brings crime to our communities.